From the outside, it always looked like Kandi and Todd had built something solid. Something long-lasting, something uncheckable. But anyone paying close attention, really paying attention, could see that there was a restlessness hidden beneath the surface long before the internet caught the scent of trouble. The most heartbreaking part is that everything Mama Joyce used to warn about, whether people dismissed it as shade, jealousy, or drama, was never random. It came from a place of instinct that Kandi simply never wanted to address. When you revisit the old interviews, the vlogs, the podcast snippets, the small in-between moments, you don't see a man trying to take advantage. You see a man slowly fading in a relationship that didn't leave much emotional room for him. Todd wasn't loud. He wasn't disrespectful. He wasn't explosive. Instead, he carried a quiet heaviness, the kind of burden a person holds when they feel unheard for far too long. Every time Todd mentioned his movie projects, his creative ideas, or the passion he still had for building something that was his, he wasn't asking for permission, he was asking to be seen. He was asking to have something that didn't depend on Kandi's fame, her schedule, her priorities. He wanted to be a husband, not a background character. And whenever he spoke about his goals, his voice was calm, measured, almost too gentle for the weight of what he was trying to communicate. But the moment those words left his mouth, you could watch Kandi's entire body change, her posture stiffening, her smile tightening, her eyes flickering with a fear she didn't know how to hide. She didn't hear ambition. She heard distance. She didn't hear a man wanting to stay productive. She heard a man preparing to leave. To Kandi, independence looked like abandonment, and personal space looked like rejection. This became the silent rhythm of their marriage. Todd asking for breathing room, and Kandi hearing a goodbye. He wasn't fighting her success. He wasn't competing with her shine. He was competing with a narrative constantly pushed on him, that he was simply enjoying the benefits of being married to a powerful, successful woman. A narrative that painted him as someone who didn't need his own dreams because he was already living in hers. That kind of pressure doesn't explode. It erodes. And that erosion showed up in their conversations about friends too. Todd talked about how his circle had faded, how he rarely saw his own boys, how every outing turned into being surrounded by Kandi's friends and Kandi's people. Not because he disliked them, but because somewhere along the way, his world had merged with hers so tightly that his identity outside the relationship began to disappear, instead of empathy. Kandi responded with confusion and annoyance. She didn't understand why a grown man wanted his own social life. She didn't understand why having his own friends mattered. She didn't understand why everything couldn't simply be combined. But for Todd, friendships weren't just about hanging out, they were about maintaining the parts of himself that didn't revolve around her. And then there were the rumors, the ones that never truly died. The stories of threesomes, the open marriage whispers, the playful comments Kandi made publicly about her interest in women, the laughter from Todd that always sounded a little forced when the topic came up. Then the appearance of Fatim suddenly everywhere, trips, photos, nights out, group moments, and then just as suddenly gone. Wiped from the frame like she had never been part of the equation at all. People speculated, did Todd catch feelings? Did Kandi develop an attachment? Were boundaries crossed? Was there something emotional beneath the surface that no one was prepared for? No one knows the truth, but the impact lingered because even the idea of a third person can become a symbol of instability. When a marriage is already fragile, what really mattered wasn't the rumors. It was what those rumors represented. A relationship already pulled thin, already stretched, already struggling to hold its shape. As time went on, Todd's exhaustion started to show not in arguments, but in silence. Not in shouting, but in the weight behind his words. When he would ask for a night out with his friends, Kandi would ask why he didn't want to spend that night with her. When he wanted to get fresh air outside the house, it became a question of whether he was avoiding her. When he wanted to simply exist as his own person, it was mistaken for emotional distance. To Kandi, closeness meant love. To Todd, Closeness without space felt like suffocation, and neither of them ever found a way to meet in the middle. There were moments where the truth slipped out. Like when Todd joked that if he tried to go play basketball, Kandi would follow him to the treadmill just to stay close. People laughed online, but in his voice, you could hear a man begging for just a little space. He didn't know how to ask for without hurting her, or when he explained gently that adults need separate routines, separate hobbies, separate interests. And Kandi shot back with, "We do everything together." That's what marriage is. She wasn't trying to trap him. She was trying to hold him. But in holding him too tightly, she didn't realize she was pushing him further away. He feared being controlled. She feared being left. Two different wounds. Two different fears. One slow motion breakup. By the time Todd reached the point where he said, "Just let a man be free," it wasn't a threat. It wasn't disrespect. It was exhaustion. Years of quiet requests finally falling out of his mouth in the only way he knew how. And Kandi looked stunned, not because she didn't know he needed space, but because she didn't want to believe he needed space from her. That was the real heartbreak. Not the rumors. Not the threesomes. Not Fathom. Not the internet gossip. The pain came from two people who truly loved each other but could never give each other the emotional environment they needed to feel safe. As time moved forward, the space between Kandi and Todd wasn't just emotional, it became visible. They could be sitting right beside each other, bodies touching, but minds miles apart. Every conversation carried a thin layer of tension, the kind that forms when two people stop hearing each other, even though they're still talking. And the saddest part was how predictable every misunderstanding became. Todd would express a need, and Kandi would translate it into a threat. There was a moment that sticks with people. The one where Todd calmly tried to explain that he wanted to see his own friends, joke around, play cards, laugh freely the way men do when they unwind together. He wasn't asking to party. He wasn't trying to sneak around. He wasn't being careless. He simply wanted a slice of normal life. But the second those words slipped out, Kandi reacted like he had insulted her. She laughed, but it wasn't a real laugh. It was one of those sharp, defensive giggles people use when they're trying to pretend something doesn't bother them. Her face said everything her laugh tried to hide. And Todd, instead of arguing, looked defeated. That kind of silence hits harder than shouting ever could. Then came the line that exposed everything. "When I'm with you, I'm with your friends." Just 12 words. But inside those 12 words lived an entire decade of emotional fatigue. A whole marriage worth of swallowed feelings. A man who loved his wife deeply but didn't know how to exist beside her without losing himself, but instead of pausing or absorbing what he meant, Kandi turned it into another disagreement. She didn't understand why spending time with her and her friends wasn't enough. She didn't understand why he needed anyone else. She didn't understand that love and independence are not opposites. They are survival. The truth was simple. Todd wanted balance. Kandi heard rejection. Todd wanted time with the guys. Kandi heard, "You bore me." Todd wanted to feel like himself again. Kandi heard, "You're the problem." They weren't fighting each other. They were fighting interpretations of each other. Then, when the internet started resurfacing old clips of Kandi joking about threesomes, laughing about experimenting with women, teasing moments with Portia, or speaking casually about bringing other partners into their private life, the speculation grew louder. Add to that the sudden rise and disappearance of Fathom, and fans began drawing lines no one could erase. Some said Todd caught emotional feelings. Some said Kandi became attached. Some said the boundaries were never clear. Some said open intimacy only works when the foundation is uncheckable. And theirs wasn't. Whether any of that was true didn't even matter anymore. Rumors don't need proof to cause damage when the relationship is already soft around the edges. What mattered was the emotional impact, how each new rumor became another layer of pressure inside a marriage, already cracking under unspoken expectations. Threesomes, sound harmless when two people are perfectly aligned. But when even one person starts to feel insecure, overlooked, or emotionally disconnected, adding a third element, sexual or emotional, can feel like dropping a match inside a room full of gasoline. And that's exactly what happened here. The intimacy meant to create excitement eventually became a question mark neither could answer. But even all of that wasn't the core issue. The real tragedy was how differently they understood love. Kandi loved through closeness, physical, emotional, constant presence. Todd loved through balanced connection mixed with space. Partnership mixed with individuality. And neither recognized the other's language until it was too late. You could see the shift in Todd, the way he stopped pushing. Not because he didn't care, but because he was tired. Tired of explaining. Tired of defending simple needs. Tired of feeling guilty for wanting to breathe. His voice grew lighter, his tone more resigned. He didn't fight loudly. He faded quietly. The exhaustion wasn't temporary, it was built over years, and you could see it in Kandi too, how her worry disguised itself as frustration. How her fear of losing him showed up as control. How every small argument became a test she didn't realize she was giving him. She wasn't trying to cage him. She was terrified he would walk away if she loosened her grip. But in trying to hold him, she accidentally held too tight. Two people holding on for dear life, but to two very different things. By the time the world saw Todd say, "Let a brother go," it wasn't rebellion. It was a man reaching the point where silence no longer protected him. A man finally saying out loud what he had whispered inside himself for years. A man who still loved his wife, but didn't know how to keep sacrificing himself just to maintain peace. And the look on Kandi's face said everything. Shock, hurt, confusion. Not because she didn't know he needed space, but because she didn't want to believe he needed space from her. Her biggest fear had always been losing people she loved. She'd said it openly for years. So the idea that the man she fought to love could feel trapped by that love devastated her. But the truth is undeniable. Love doesn't fail because two people don't care. Love fails when caring becomes mismatched. Kandi, I wanted constant closeness. Todd wanted the freedom to still be himself. Kandi wanted togetherness as proof of loyalty. Todd wanted independence as proof of trust. Neither was wrong. But together they couldn't make it work. Now, as divorce talk circles the internet, people aren't shocked. They're revisiting old footage, connecting dots, realizing this didn't collapse overnight. It weakened slowly, quietly. While cameras rolled and fans watched without truly seeing, the marriage wasn't suddenly breaking apart in the present. It had been breaking for years. The world is only now noticing the cracks that were always there, waiting beneath the surface. Waiting beneath the surface.